that simple?" I asked him, my voice breaking with frustration. "You think you can just apologize and everything will be fine? You left me in the middle of nowhere. You didn't even care that I was scared, that I had no idea where I was or how to get back to the hotel. How could I just forget that?" Sam's face fell, and I could see the regret in his eyes, but it wasn't enough. I wanted more than regret. I wanted an explanation, and I wanted it to be real. I wanted him to tell me that he understood why what he had done was so wrong, not just that he had messed up. The air between us felt thick, the weight of the silence unbearable. I stepped back, feeling a sense of distance grow between us. "I don't know what to do right now," I whispered. "I just need some space." Sam nodded, his shoulders slumping as if the weight of everything had finally hit him. He didn't try to stop me as I turned to leave the lobby. I walked out into the cool night air, feeling the chill of the evening against my skin. The streets of the small town were quiet now, almost deserted. I wandered aimlessly, not sure where I was going, but needing to be away from Sam, away from everything. As I walked through the narrow streets, I tried to process everything that had happened. My mind kept coming back to one thing: the feeling of being abandoned, left behind like I didn't matter. I had trusted Sam, and now it felt like that trust had been shattered, just like that, in the blink of an eye. "I don't know if I can just forget about this, Sam," I whispered, my voice barely above a whisper. "You left me, alone, in a place I didn't know, without any way to contact you. I don't know if I can just move past that." The apology was there, but the trust was gone. I didn't know what to do anymore. I didn't know if I could even look at him the same way again. All I knew was that the road ahead seemed uncertain, and I was standing at a crossroads, unsure of which way to go. The silence between us was heavy, and I could barely look Sam in the eyes. His apology was there, but it didn't feel real. How could it? After everything that had happened, how could one simple "sorry" erase the humiliation I had felt being abandoned in a foreign place? I had tried to stay calm, to give him a chance to explain, but the more I thought about it, the more it felt like he was just offering me words without understanding the full weight of what he had done. "I don't know if I can just forget about this, Sam," I said again, my voice trembling. "It's not about a joke anymore. It's about trust. You left me. You didn't even think for 1 second how I would feel." He was quiet for a long time, and I could see him struggling, his eyes darting around the empty lobby, avoiding mine. I stood there, feeling the rush of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. Anger, hurt, confusion, they all mixed together, leaving me unsure of what to do next. I didn't want to be alone, but I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay. I had to figure out what came next for me. "I know I've messed up," Sam finally spoke, his voice shaky now. "But I swear, it was just a stupid prank. I didn't think it through. I never intended for it to go this far. I thought you'd laugh it off, but when I saw how upset you were, I realized I'd made the biggest mistake." I shook my head, my thoughts racing. The thing that hurt the most wasn't just being left alone. It was the fact that Sam hadn't taken the time to think about me at all. How could he have assumed I'd just laugh along with him and his friends? It wasn't like him to be so thoughtless. I had spent years with this man, and now I was faced with someone I didn't recognize. As the night wore on, I realized I couldn't stay like this forever. I couldn't just ignore what had happened, pretend that everything was fine when it wasn't. I had to make a decision about where I went from here. Could I forgive Sam for what he had done? Was this just a momentary lapse, or had something changed that I couldn't ignore? Finally, I decided to return to the hotel. I wasn't sure if I was ready to face Sam, but I knew I couldn't stay out there indefinitely. When I walked back into the hotel lobby, it was eerily quiet. The usual buzz of laughter and conversation from the others had faded. I glanced around, but no one was there. I approached the desk, asking if anyone had seen Sam or the others, but the receptionist just shook his head. "They left," he said curtly, and with that, I was left alone in the empty lobby. A wave of confusion hit me. Where had they gone? Had they left without me? After everything that had happened, had they just decided to go on without me? My heart raced as I tried to piece together what was going on. Had they all turned their backs on me, or was this just another part of whatever twisted game they had been playing? I paced the lobby, trying to make sense of the situation. My mind was reeling. The more I thought about it, the more it didn't add up. If Sam truly felt guilty, if he was sorry, why would he leave without saying anything? Why hadn't he tried to find me? To talk to me? To fix things? Just when I thought I couldn't take the uncertainty anymore, the door to the hotel opened, and I heard footsteps approaching. I turned to find Sam standing in the doorway, his face tight, his eyes avoiding mine. He seemed hesitant, unsure of how to approach me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I could feel the weight of the silence pressing down on us, and the distance between us felt insurmountable. Finally, Sam broke the silence. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said quietly, his voice strained. "I never thought it would go this far. I thought you'd find it funny, that we could laugh about it together. But I see now that it wasn't funny. I'm sorry. I really am." I stared at him, trying to process his words. Part of me wanted to believe him, wanted to think that he was truly sorry. But the other part of me, angry, hurt, couldn't let go of what had happened. I had trusted him, and now everything felt different. The rest of the evening passed in a blur, but I didn't want to face Sam or his friends. I couldn't bring myself to talk to any of them. How could I? They had all known what was going on, and no one had said a word. I needed to figure out what this meant for me and what I was willing to accept from someone I had thought I could trust. The rest of the night felt like a blur of emotions that I couldn't quite sort through. I walked out of the hotel, needing air, needing to escape from the tension in the room. As I made my way down the cobblestone streets of the little town, the sounds of laughter and conversation from the others seemed to echo in my mind, a reminder of how I had been left behind. My heart was heavy with betrayal, my head full of doubt and anger. I couldn't even look at Sam the same way anymore, not after what had happened. I ended up sitting on a bench near the edge of town, just staring into the distance. The sun had set, casting an orange glow across the hills, and the quiet of the evening wrapped around me. But the calmness outside did nothing to soothe the storm inside. My thoughts were racing, and I couldn't stop replaying everything that had happened. How had things gotten to this point? Was this just a momentary lapse in judgment for Sam and his friends, or was there something more to it? As I sat there, I thought about the trip we had planned together. It was supposed to be a time for us to reconnect, to relax, and enjoy each other's company. But now it felt like everything had turned upside down. The laughter, the carefree attitude they had shown, it all seemed like a facade. Were they all in on it? Did they all think it was funny to see me suffer in a place where I had no one but myself to rely on? It didn't make sense. I pulled out my phone, staring at it for a moment. No messages, no calls. I felt isolated and alone, cut off not just from Sam, but from everything I had thought I knew. It was the first time in a long time that I didn't feel like I knew my husband. His friends, who I had spent so many nights with laughing and joking, now felt like strangers. And yet, the silence from them all felt deafening. I hadn't even received a single text or apology from anyone else. It was as if they were all pretending that nothing had happened, hoping it would blow over. It was wrong, and I don't know how you expect me to just brush it off like it's nothing. You left me. You abandoned me in a place I didn't know, with no way of getting back. And for what? A laugh? Sam stood there, his face flushed with embarrassment. I could see the regret in his eyes now, but it didn't change what had happened. I couldn't just forget how he had made me feel. The more I thought about it, the more hurt I became. What kind of person does that to their partner? The anger I felt was now mixed with a deep sadness, a realization that maybe I didn't know my husband as well as I thought I did. The silence between us stretched, and I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on both of us. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Sam spoke again, his voice quieter this time. "I'm sorry. I really am. I didn't think it would go this far. We just thought it would be a funny prank. I didn't mean for you to get hurt." But I wasn't sure his words meant anything anymore. The damage had already been done. A prank had turned into something far worse, something that had shaken my trust in him. I didn't know if I could go back to the way things were, if I could ever look at him the same way again. The trip was supposed to be about us, about reconnecting, enjoying each other's company, making memories together. Instead, it had become a painful reminder of how fragile trust can be, how quickly it can be broken. I turned away from him, feeling a lump form in my throat. "I don't know what to say, Sam," I whispered. "I just need some space. I can't keep pretending like everything's okay when it's not." He didn't try to stop me as I walked out of the room. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay there, surrounded by people who had seen what happened and done nothing to stop it. I needed time to think, to process everything that had just happened. Was this just a one-time mistake, or had something deeper been going on? As I stepped out into the cool night air, I tried to shake off the overwhelming feeling of betrayal, but it lingered, creeping into every corner of my mind. I had never felt more alone, not even when I was stranded on that hilltop, waiting for them to come back. At least then, I had hoped that they'd show up. Now, I wasn't so sure anymore. "Funny?" My voice cracked with disbelief. "You thought it would be funny to leave me stranded in a foreign country, without any way to reach you or get back to the hotel? You're joking, right?" He opened his mouth to respond, but the words didn't come. Instead, the silence stretched on, thick with the weight of his unspoken apology. I didn't know what to feel: anger, betrayal, confusion. But one thing was clear. The trip I had been looking forward to had taken a turn I never saw coming, and now nothing seemed the same. The moment Sam stood up and apologized, I could barely contain the storm of emotions brewing inside me. I had expected something, anything that would make sense of what had just happened, but instead, I was met with an explanation that only added to the chaos. He said it was meant to be a joke, something to break the monotony of the trip. But to me, it wasn't funny. It was cruel, thoughtless, and I felt utterly humiliated. I had thought we were going to have a good time together, away from our usual busy lives. But now, standing in front of me, Sam was nothing like the person I had married. The man who had promised to be by my side, to always protect me, had instead left me alone in a foreign place, without a second thought. The anger I had been suppressing suddenly boiled to the surface. "I can't believe you think this is just some joke," I said, my voice shaking with frustration. "You didn't even think about what it would do to me, being alone like that, lost, without any way to contact you. How could you do that to me, Sam?" The others at the table shifted uncomfortably. I noticed that none of them were laughing anymore. They all seemed to sense the tension in the room, but none of them spoke up. It was as if they had all silently agreed to play along with the prank without considering how it would affect me. I felt like an outsider in my own life, surrounded by people who were supposed to care for me, but who had just abandoned me without a second thought. Sam opened his mouth to respond, but I didn't want to hear any more excuses. I wasn't sure if I could forgive him, if I even wanted to. This trip, which had been supposed to be a time for us to reconnect, had instead shown me how little I meant to him. He had turned something that should have been a shared experience into an ordeal that I would never forget. "I don't care if it was supposed to be funny," I continued, my voice getting louder. Softened with curiosity when he saw me standing there, looking disheveled and anxious. I tried to explain my situation, but the words came out in a jumble. My Italian was limited, and his English wasn't much better. I fumbled with my phone, showing him the pictures of the town and trying to gesture toward the general direction I needed to go. He looked at me for a long moment, his eyes narrowing as he processed what I was saying. Finally, he nodded and motioned for me to get in his car. His kindness felt like a lifeline, and I quickly climbed into the passenger seat, eager to get back to some semblance of safety. As we drove through the winding roads, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every glance in the rearview mirror felt like it held some unspoken meaning. Was I being paranoid? Or was there something off about the situation? My mind was still reeling from the realization that I had been abandoned, left behind like an afterthought, by the very people I trusted. I hadn't even processed it fully, but the anger was slowly building inside me. I wasn't just confused, I was hurt. When we finally arrived back in the town, I thanked the elderly man and handed him a few euros for his trouble. The sun was beginning to set, casting a soft, golden light over the buildings. I walked quickly through the narrow streets, desperate to find Sam and his friends. I needed answers. I reached the hotel, my heart racing with a mixture of dread and anticipation. I opened the door to the lobby and saw them all sitting there, laughing together like nothing had happened. Sam looked up, his expression turning from casual amusement to surprise when he saw me standing there, eyes wide with disbelief. "Where have you been?" he asked, his tone light, as if I had just wandered off for a few minutes. I couldn't speak at first. The shock of the situation was overwhelming. Finally, I found my voice. "Where have I been?" I repeated, my voice shaking with anger. "You left me. You left me alone in the middle of nowhere with no way to get back, and now you're acting like it's some kind of joke?" His face faltered, and I saw the flicker of guilt pass across his eyes. The others remained quiet, their expressions unreadable. Sam stood up, his usual carefree demeanor replaced with something that resembled unease. "It wasn't like that," he said, his voice quieter now. "We didn't mean for you to get lost. It was just a prank. We thought it would be funny, you know? Something different." I stood there for what felt like hours, desperately trying to find a solution. Each minute that passed only made the situation worse. My phone had no signal, and I didn't speak enough Italian to ask for help. I tried walking back down the hill, hoping I might run into someone along the way, but it was hopeless. The thought of being lost in a foreign country, with no idea how to navigate my way back, filled me with dread. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of what would turn into a nightmare. The laughter I had heard just before they disappeared, it was no longer funny. I stood there, on that hilltop, feeling the weight of confusion and panic settle in my chest. I had tried calling Sam and his friends over and over, but my calls were met with nothing but the dull beep of voicemail. Every second felt like an eternity, and the more I searched the area, the more it became clear. They had left me. It was no accident. They had planned it. I was utterly alone in a foreign country with no way to get back to the town and no idea where to go. At first, I told myself it was just a joke, that maybe they had wandered off and were waiting to see how long it would take for me to catch up. But as time passed, I began to question my assumptions. Why hadn't they left a note or at least sent a message? Why did they leave me with no explanation? The confusion turned into frustration, and my frustration quickly morphed into a deep sense of betrayal. I couldn't believe they would do this to me, especially Sam. He had always been the considerate one, the thoughtful one. This wasn't like him at all. But now, as the minutes ticked by, I was realizing that I didn't know what to think. It felt like they had planned this moment, and I was just the unwitting target of their cruel game. I turned around and began to walk down the path, hoping I'd find a familiar face, a local, anyone who could help. My heart raced with each step. I wasn't even sure which direction to go, but I couldn't just stand there. The hilltop stretched out before me, a vast expanse of nothing but rolling hills, trees, and the occasional farmhouse in the distance. I wasn't even sure where to start looking. It felt like hours before I stumbled upon the first house, a small, stone building nestled against the hillside. I approached it with caution, hoping to find someone who could help. I knocked on the door, my hand trembling as I waited. A few moments later, an elderly man opened the door. His face. One afternoon, we went on a group hike to a nearby hilltop, a spot known for its panoramic views of the surrounding countryside. The idea had come from Sam's friend Mark, who had been talking about it all morning. It was supposed to be a highlight of our trip, a chance to enjoy the stunning landscape and bond as a group. I was excited. The thought of being surrounded by nature, taking in the beauty of the land, was just what I needed. The hike started off fine. The air was crisp, and we talked as we made our way up the winding path. Sam and I joked around, and I could tell he was enjoying himself. But the further we went, the more I noticed that something was off. The guys seemed to be distancing themselves from me, chatting more among themselves, ignoring my attempts to engage in the conversation. It felt like I was being left out of a private joke, one I wasn't in on. When we reached the top of the hill, The view was breathtaking. I pulled out my phone to take some pictures, wanting to capture the moment. As I stood there, marveling at the sight, I turned my back for just a moment to snap a photo of the landscape. The next thing I knew, the laughter from behind me had stopped. I turned around, and they were gone. My heart sank. At first, I thought maybe they had just walked ahead exploring the area, but the longer I stood there, the more I realized something was wrong. I called out their names, hoping they were just out of sight, but there was no answer. The quietness of the hilltop was eerie. My mind raced. Where had they gone? Why hadn't they told me? I walked to the edge of the hill and looked down the path we had just come from, hoping to spot them in the distance. But there was nothing. No sign of them anywhere. I tried calling Sam's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. A sick feeling spread through me as I realized this wasn't an accident. They had left me here, alone in a foreign place. Panic set in. I had no map, no GPS, no idea where I was. The town we were staying in was far below, and I had no way of knowing how to get back. My mind raced. How had they left me? Was this some kind of joke? But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. What was supposed to be a relaxing vacation in Italy quickly turned into a nightmare when my husband and his friends thought it would be funny to leave me stranded in a small town. One morning, I found myself alone, lost in an unfamiliar place with no way back to the hotel. What I first thought was just a harmless prank soon had me wondering if there was more to it. Was this just a joke? Or was there something deeper going on? It all started with excitement. The idea of spending a few days in a quaint small town in Italy had seemed like the perfect escape. My husband Sam and his friends had planned the trip as a way to relax and disconnect from the stress of daily life. I was thrilled, imagining the rolling hills of Tuscany, the historic streets of tiny villages, and of course, the food. It sounded like the dream vacation, and I couldn't wait to get started. We landed in Italy and made our way to a small, rustic town called San Pietro. The kind of place you'd expect to find in a postcard. Cobblestone streets, charming little shops, and views that seemed straight out of a painting. We arrived at a small family-owned hotel, which, though not luxurious, had a cozy charm. The rooms were simple, the beds creaked, and the smell of the old wood in the hallways was oddly comforting. It was everything I had imagined an Italian getaway would be. The first couple of days were full of excitement. We wandered through the narrow streets, sampled local wines, and enjoyed leisurely dinners in cozy trattorias, savoring every moment. Sam and I had been married for 5 years, and although we had both been busy with work recently, this trip felt like an opportunity to reconnect, to rediscover the magic of our early days together. I was happy, and he seemed to be too, though he often slipped away for private conversations with his friends, something I didn't think much of at the time. It was on the third day that I started to notice something strange. Sam and his friends were acting odd. They would whisper to each other in hushed tones, exchanging glances whenever I entered the room. They would laugh, but there was something off about it, a nervous energy that I couldn't quite place. I tried to brush it off as typical travel excitement, but it began to feel like they were all in on something I wasn't privy to.